Backstabbings and character assassinations have permeated the Australian political landscape from colonial days through to the present. The barbs and darts thrown have mainly been verbal, but there have also been some memorable stoushes, including a punch-up during the debate over selecting Canberra as the site of the Australian capital. In this episode of Political Power Plays, we take a look at some of these events, including attacks on 2 members of the royal family and the first assassination of a serving member of an Australian parliament. September the 5th, 1994, a gunman opens fire on a dark Cabramatta street. 4 shots and New South Wales Labor MP John Newman is dead, the victim of a politically inspired murder.
Stop screaming! What has happened?
Newman's fiancée, Lucy Wang, witnessed the killing as she helped Newman cover their car after 3 paint bombings and numerous death threats. The gunman has never been caught, despite the long-running police investigation. One man ordered and paid for the killing, a desperate and devious rival to Newman in the drug-riven and crime-saturated multilingual Sydney seat.
John Newman was an anti-crime crusader out at Cabramatta and he was a member of the Legislative Assembly. But he had a political rival, and the political rival was Phuong No. He had political aspirations. He desperately wanted to be the first Vietnamese-born member of state parliament, and Newman stood in his way.
Newman had a reputation for toughness, arrogance and intractability. He took on the area's organised crime bosses, the feared Asian gangs and others dealing in drugs and prostitution, further inflaming No's hatred.
No ran a criminal gang that was running the 5T gangs out in Cabramatta.
No offered 5T gang leader Tri Man Tran $10,000 to eliminate Newman. Tran refused, describing the contract as too dangerous.
Tried about 4 times to actually have Newman killed. But then in 1994, in September 1994, after Newman returned home from an ALP meeting, No was finally successful, and he was shot dead in his driveway as he was putting a cover on his car.
Public outrage at the assassination of a local politician sparked a massive police inquiry.
That is a tragedy. It is not the Australian way, and I must say that it has taken me back, and I'm sure it will take back all my colleagues, irrespective of their politics.
And a crackdown on the streets, but No prospered until police pounced.
No then actually began his rise in the ALP, but it was stopped in its tracks when eventually the trail led to him, and he was convicted of the murder. So wound up not being anything but not a member of the party or not a member of Parliament, but actually a member of the Jalberg gang. So.
July the 15th, 1977, another murder. The victim, political hopeful Donald Mackay, shot dead and carried away in the car park of the Griffith Hotel in the New South Wales Riverina. Mackay had political ambitions and powerful political enemies.
He ran for the Liberal Party, didn't get the seat. It actually went to a national politician, but it was his preferences that actually helped unseat Al Grasby. He hated Al Grasby because he knew that Al Grasby had very close connections to a lot of these Italian families in Griffith, and a lot of them were involved with, quite a few were involved with drugs and whatever else, and they hated each other, quite frankly.
Grasby blamed Mackay for his loss. Grasby also enjoyed an up-close and personal relationship with the Calabrian Mafia, accused of political patronage of known criminals and expediting immigration approvals for members of the family. Under the command of motor mechanic Robert Trimboli, Griffith and surrounding districts became the nation's hub of illegal marijuana production. He prospered. Members of the Calabrian Italian community found sudden wealth dubbed grass castles studded the town. Mackay suspected corrupt police involvement, compiled a dossier and took it directly to the State Attorney General. That resulted in a special police task force arriving in Griffith. It carried out a series of raids with a loss to the family of more than $23 million. The raids outraged Trimboli. He demanded Mackay be killed and dictated the terms of the contract, that the body must never be found and that a shotgun should not be used, because that would make the Italians the suspects. His mafia associate, wine grower Tony Sergi, issued the contract. Victorian career killer James Frederick Baisley carried out the hit in the car park of the Griffith Hotel, but he never faced a murder charge.
And he went to prison and died without ever revealing where the body was or telling the whole truth of what had happened to McKay.
A mafia supergrass told detectives Graspie had been at the beck and call of the mafia, his election campaigns funded by the mafia, and that he'd been paid $40,000 to smear McKay's widow, Barbara. Trimboli escaped overseas and eventually died in a Spanish hospital at the age of 58. His Sydney funeral erupted into a melee as family members fought a running battle with the media outside the church. On July 16, 1980, unknown thugs bashed Sydney Labor Party identity and later MP Peter Baldwin, inflicting severe head and body injuries. The attack is alleged to have been a result of a dispute over branch stacking in the party's Enmore branch. Peter Baldwin survived, went into the federal parliament and served as a minister in the Hawke and Keating governments. After the government's defeat in 1996, Peter Baldwin left the public arena to form a successful company. January 26, 1994, Prince Charles is in Australia and officiating at the Sydney Australia Day ceremony at Darling Harbour. 2 shots from a starting pistol fired by 23-year-old student David Kang, who rushed the stage only to trip and fall at Charles' feet. New South Wales Premier John Fay and Clean Up Australia founder Ian Kiernan tackled the attacker as security bumped the Prince out of harm's way and police and military personnel swarmed the stage. The incident made news around the world. Charles showed regal aplomb, carefully adjusting his cuffs throughout the drama as security grabbed the young man and bundled him away. With the commotion over, the unfazed royal carried on with his presentation duties.
Mr. Premier, Your Excellency, ladies and gentlemen, here I have been standing waiting for what I thought was the young schoolboy and schoolgirl of the year to come and receive a prize.
He actually later admitted that when he approached the Prince with the starter pistol, he kind of expected the security detail around the Prince to open fire on him. So it was more or less seen as an attempt at suicide by cop.
By far the worst thing that happened to me was years ago when somebody had chucked an empty milk bottle at me in a car. And I was in one of those big Rolls Royces belonging to the Queen, you know, with a huge high roof and big windows. This chap lobbed this thing with unerring accuracy. It came straight in the window beside me. The whole boiling window came in on me. I fortunately turned my head away and all the glass fell on my lap. But, you know, if it had been a full milk bottle, it might have been a different story.
But an attack on one of Charles's forebears back in 1868 proved to be almost fatal. Australia's first royal visitor, Queen Victoria's son Alfred, the Duke of Edinburgh, arrived in the pre-federal colony to a right royal reception. He was feted by the fledgling colonials and greeted everywhere by a cheering throng. It included a reception, a picnic in fact, at the harbourside Clontarf. But there, would-be assassin, disgruntled Irishman Henry O'Farrell lay in wait. As the Duke mingled with the merrymakers on a sunny Sydney day, O'Farrell leapt behind him, drew a pistol and fired. The Duke collapsed. O'Farrell took aim and fired again. That bullet deflected by businessman George Thorne, who struck O'Farrell's arm and in doing so suffered a gunshot wound to the foot. The crowd erupted, attempting to lynch O'Farrell, and according to news reports, only police intervention prevented him from being taken out of the hands of justice. The Prince recovered. O'Farrell faced the hangman's noose at Darlinghurst Jail, and Mr Thorne received the Prince's fob watch and a stipend for life. The royal legacy to Sydney also included the construction of the Royal Prince Alfred Hospital at Camperdown in Sydney's inner western suburbs. Another near-fatal incident occurred in 1966 when an angry young man shot at and wounded ALP leader Arthur Calwell. The attack came as Calwell left an anti-conscription rally where he'd railed against the government on the issue and the conduct of the Vietnam War.
A vote for conscription on Saturday is a blood vote.
19-year-old factory worker Peter Coken approached Calwell's car.
His life was kind of going nowhere at the time, and he decided that he would actually take a gun, go down to an anti-conscription rally where he knew Arthur Calwell, the opposition leader, was speaking, whose politics he didn't like, apparently. And he saw Calwell getting into a car, and approached the car, and Caldwell thought it must have been a well-wisher because he strode up with such sort of confidence. He started to wind the window down. Koken then puts a gun against the window and fires.
He spent a night in Sydney Hospital, then returned to Melbourne to a hero's welcome.
Just one thought, Mr. Cole. Do you think that politicians should be protected more than they are?
Oh, I don't know. I never thought it. I never wanted it. I walk around thinking that most Australians are all Australians are decent people. These things just happen.
Will you be seeking any protection in the future, Mr. Cole?
I shouldn't think so.
But his anti-war rallies worked against him at the ballot box. He lost in a landslide to Harold Holt later that year, handed over the ALP reins to Gough Whitlam, and then retired from Parliament in 1972. Peter Koken spent 10 years in custody after being found guilty of attempted murder. He studied and wrote poetry, and on release took an arts degree at Newcastle University and became a successful writer. In our next episode of Political Power Plays, we'll look at the history of political turncoats, the so-called rats in the ranks, the fights between the right and the left that's disrupted Australian political parties, ending sometimes with long-lasting bitterness, sometimes with reconciliation.